Grain growers in Western Australia's medium and high rainfall areas have much to gain by narrowing the row spacings used in their seeding programs. Peter Newman is the communications leader with the Australian Herbicide Resistance Initiative, based at Plant Farm, Geraldton. He says boosting crop competition in this way is an increasingly important non-herbicide weed control tactic.
So if we talk about herbicide-resistant weed management, we've got to focus on non-herbicide tools, and there's only a couple of non-herbicide weed control tools that are any good. One of them is weed seed control at harvest, so our chaff carts and windrow burning and Harrington destructors and things. The other is crop competition with weeds. And so we know that narrow row spacings, higher seeding rates equals more competition with weeds, and we can really suppress weed seed set particularly.
Mr Newman coordinated a Grains Research and Development Corporation trial in the Northern Wheat Belt, assisted by the Department of Agriculture and Food WA. The trial looked at the use of reduced row spacing, using paired row seeding, to help crops outcompete weeds and produce higher yields.
So the research trials that we've looked at looks at 3 seeding systems, so single row sowing, paired row sowing and ribbon seeding, at 3 row spacings, 6, 9 and 12 inches, and at 3 seeding rates, 60, 90 and 120 kilos per hectare. GRDC funded the trials and they responded very quickly with some funding, which was great, because I was talking to a local farmer about paired row sowing and saying if we're at paired row sowing on 12-inch row spacing, we've got as much length of row in the paddock as if we were at 6-inch row spacing on a single row, for example. So can paired row sowing at 12-inch, can it yield something like 6-inch? And so that's what we're trying to achieve by looking at those trials. We think that it'll probably be somewhere in between. That paired row sowing won't yield as well as 6-inch, but maybe it might be as good as, say, 9-inch, for example. And so that's what we're trying to tease out with that trial work.
Mr Newman says that row spacing is something every farmer should consider for weed control and yield. He also says that with new machinery and technology, problems such as heavy stubble loads will become less of an impediment to using narrower spacings.
What we say is that really people should aim to go as narrow row spacing as is practical. So we can't have everybody achieving 6-inch row spacing, because in some areas the crop yields will be just too high and we won't get through the stubble. But what I'm encouraging growers to do is, when you're thinking about buying that new machine, rather than just speaking to the machinery dealer and the neighbour, have a look at the data, and the data will tell you what row spacing you should be at for your area, and it will probably tell you that you need to be at the narrowest row spacing that you can get to. You need to be at the narrowest row spacing that is practical for your area.
Mingenew farmer Peter Horwood hosted the trials and says he can see great value in using narrower row spacings to increase crop competition.
In terms of weed competition, the wider row spacings, you look down the rows and you can see the big bushy ryegrass, you know. You get to the narrow row spacings and if there's ryegrass there, it's not stooling out, it's quite, you know, slender, 1 or 2 heads. So there's less of it, but there's also, it's going to produce less seed. And I suppose one of the classic ways, you look down the rows between the plots and the ryegrass just bushes out and goes mad. So, you know, that ryegrass is the weed there we're considering, not radish, but that's what the population is. But yes, it'll reduce the amount of seed set and yield. Well, I think that's there's enough research to show that's a foregone conclusion. There's going to be more yield there, and I suppose why combines were 7 inches years ago.
Mr Horwood currently uses 10-inch row spacings, but says his system is flexible, with the ability to ribbon sow or sow using split rows. He is now looking to adapt his machinery as part of the move to narrower row spacings.
Future machinery decisions will be based around reducing the row width, and look, to be honest, we've already sort of thought about it and talked about it, how we can do it with our present bar, without even, you know, keeping your present bar and narrowing up the row spacings. And I think the way we'll be doing it is going for try and put a wider press wheel on, and then we can either ribbon seed or pair row it, and so that'll allow us to do it with our present system and hopefully control the costs going forward.